A very warm welcome to you and welcome to K24 this morning. My name is Jeff Mote. As always, we love it when you're part of the conversation right at the start. You can get me on Twitter at I am Jeff Mote or at K24 TV. Now today we're taking a twist from the usual conversation. Not matters politics, but matters to do with the economy, matters to do with real estate and where it stands at this particular point in time. There's an old saying that, when it comes to investments, it's as safe as houses. Is that still the norm even moving forward after Corona? That's what is discussed in studio. I have a very able panel to take us through the business and the numbers of that conversation. That's coming up in a bit. But even as we see the political rhetoric heating up today, we switch gears to matters economy and specifically real estate. Now, the COVID pandemic has disrupted all markets and real estate has not been spared. How did it fare in 2020 and what's the outlook in 2021? Also, what's the effect of politics having on the economy as a whole? We discussed the state of real estate and the economy on K24 this morning. But first, the newspaper headlines. Off with the front page of the People Daily, as you can see right there, some good news for devolution in the counties. 409 billion shillings budget bounty for counties. Let's scroll down on that. Treasury and governors agree on an enhanced budgetary allocation, the highest since devolution was introduced, ending speculation of a new standoff over revenue sharing. This has always been a contentious point when it comes to money moving from the center to the periphery, but it seems this time round a solution in the offing moving forward. You can find this story on page 4 of your People Daily with all the details in there. Right next to that, though, Kalonzo's snide remark that got Muthama furious. It took a mourner to prevent the former Machakos senator from charging at the Wiper leader, who had made some remarks about Muthama's wife, who's actually vying for the Machakos senatorial seat there indeed. And as you can see right there, this coming off the backdrop of an initiative that should be building bridges really is ironic when you think about it. But you can find this story as well on page 6 of your People Daily with all the details of that therein. Let's scroll to the top and see what we have in this paper. Law heavyweights give CJ position a wide berth. From a sports specialist to a judge with the worst ruling globally, many applicants for the Chief Justice position are not well known. As you can see right there, some people of interest as far as that is concerned who have forwarded their names from William Ouko, Martha Koome, Said Juma Chitembwe, Nduma Nderi, Frederick Ngatia, Professor Patricia Mbote, Philip Murgor, and Dr. Moni Wekesa, just some of the names that are seeking that particular position, but also their positions in the High Court as well need to be filled as well, and those have been forwarded. And you can find this story again on page 2 of your People Daily. If you don't have your physical copy, by the way, you can get it straight to your phone. The number that you dial is star 550 star 4 hash, and it's brought to you by the People Daily and Safaricom. Let's what the other papers have for you this morning. Look at the Daily Nation's front page. Raila bets on tighter ties with Jubilee, as you can see right there. And this is a quote from the ODM leader. It will be an unstoppable movement. We'll also bring together other parties. River Nile has left Victoria and no force will stop it. ODM leader tells of plans to form an unstoppable, bigger political movement with ruling party and other groups, giving the clearest indication yet of a coalition to take on Deputy President William Ruto in the race for State House. Now, this is a story you can get on page 4 of your Daily Nation with all the details therein. Let's scroll further down on that particular paper. CBC, what we know so far. Of course, some questions even as it continues to be rolled out. Let's not forget for those students who started the CBC learning, they get to university in 2029. So, of course, teething problems as they move along, but the Daily Nation seeking to answer some questions parents and education stakeholders might have on how the CBC will affect learning. They answer those queries, and that can be found on page 6 and 7 of your Daily Nation. Let's see what we have at the top of your Daily Nation at this particular point. Right there, they're asking the same question. 13 individuals, but who will be the next Chief Justice? They've all applied for this particular position as the JSC sits down to go through these particular applications and gazettes the short list on that. Of course, very many people focusing on that, and you can find that story on page 5 of your Daily Nation. Let's look at what the Standard has now. Why teachers are new power gurus. Let's scroll down on that. Teachers to get more powers over your child's career, from imparting knowledge to molding character and behavior. They'll also have a big say in the administration of critical school-based tests that will account for up to 60% of the final academic score. So as you can see right now, the CBC's key point also in terms of trying to just delink what has been a very high premium in terms of tests at the end of a particular term period or an academic learning period, and that's why they want to make sure that it's continuous assessment that makes the bulk of the grades that a student gets. You can find that in your copy of your standard. Also in the standard, police responded to Ruto allies' security concerns. Police say DP security is intact after Tanga leaders ask IG to probe alleged absence of officers, plot for chaos in rallies, and withdrawal of MPs' bodyguards. This isn't the first time we've heard such claims, and you can find this particular story on page 2 of your standard this morning. Moving right along, see what you have in the standard now. BBI vote support appears on shaky ground. This courtesy of a new poll. It could be affected not just by undecided voters, but by voter apathy. This coming in, and as the numbers stack up right now, only 21% support it compared with 43% who said they did not. So that's where they stand. But also with this particular poll, they say it's not only those who support or do not support, there are those who, from this particular poll, are apathetic. They really don't care which way it goes, and that's also going to be a crucial constituency when it comes to the referendum, if indeed it gets there. You can find this as well in your copy of your star. Also in your star, 100 Ruto MPs stop Jubilee Party donations. As you can see, the boat still rocking as far as the ruling party is concerned right there. And even as you look at that, this again coming off the backdrop of some MPs who have been quote-unquote termed as disloyal, might be on the chopping block as far as Jubilee is concerned. You can find that story as well in your copy of your star this morning. Finally, front and center, and we'll be talking about matters economy as well. Kenya Power enters solar to curb consumer switch. Utility is racing to curb squeeze from defection of heavy consuming industrialists from the national grid. 54.8%. That's the number they're giving in terms of revenues that utility gets from industrialists. And if these particular industrialists switch over to solar power, then clearly that's a dent in Kenya Power's revenue, and they'll also need to switch up on that. You can find that story as well in your copy of your Business Daily this morning. So that's what you're waking up to across your dailies as far as this is concerned. But right here, we're talking about the state of the economy, the state of real estate, and how politics and the interlinkage between that is playing in, and how we move from there. What's the outlook for 2021? That's what we're talking about right here. This is K24 This Morning. So as always, we're talking about matters, economy. Love it when you're part of the conversation. You can get me at I am Jeff Mote or at K24 TV. Let me get to my panel, all in studio this time round. First of all, joined by George Mburu. He is the CEO of Mizizi Africa Homes Limited. Morning, George.
Morning.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Asante sana for making time as well. Also joined by Bonke Mwai. He's the CEO, Step Villa Properties. Morning, Bona Bonke.
Morning.
Asante sana. Thank you for making time to be on the show.
Thank you.
Asante sana. This is your first time right here on this particular panel. However, we have someone who's been, is a friend of the show and usually comes with a bag full of numbers. Sometimes you hear what he has to say and you're not really sure where we are going as a country, economically speaking. Reginald Kazutu, he's an economist. Morning, Reggie.
Morning, Jeff.
Karibu sana, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Even right before we go in, are there any optimistic numbers we have from where you stand right now? Because we spoke over the phone yesterday, and I was like, Reggie, every time we speak, you almost want to storm Treasury and ask them what's going on.
And unfortunately, Jeff, the numbers are what the numbers are. You cannot beat them. Mm-hmm. You cannot torture them to tell you what they want. Mm-hmm. You just have to read them the way it is, and just hope that the policymakers are looking at the same numbers. Okay, as they say, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. We'll be coming to you on that.
Let me come back to this side of our studio. Mr. Bonke, we've come from a very tumultuous 2020 across all industries. Even if you were prepared with some cash in reserve, nobody could have seen what was coming and the effect that it would have. From a businessman's perspective, even before you go into real estate, how is the outlook for 2021 looking like? We've seen some indicators, private sector saying that 2021 will be better, will employ more. From where you stand, are you as optimistic?
Thank you so much. Well, 2020 was a very tough year.
to be honest, especially as a businessman, I mean, the businesses were not doing well. And the majority of Kenyans lost their jobs, and most of Kenyans who own their first properties, I mean, some have been auctioned. But looking at 2021 and how the state is operating and looking at the economy, I'm quite optimistic that our economy is going to grow exponentially. It just needs some level of patience, but we must be quite optimistic. And 2021 looking quite positive, and I'm very convinced that by the end of this year we'll be talking a different story.
Right.
Yes.
So you're feeling this is a good year?
It is a good year for the economy. Okay. But now, which we'll discuss later, the politics also going to play a very fundamental role as far as the economy of the country is concerned. So politicians should also manage what are they feeding the people of Kenya with, because they must also be very sensitive, because last year, majority of Kenyans, people, they don't have hope. They need leaders who can give them hope. But now when some politicians are taking advantage of the current situation of Kenyans, it is quite unfortunate. So our politicians should also be tamed on what they're feeding the country with. And, you know, corporate leaders also should also consider, because as an employer, yes, Corona affected us, but I sat down with my team, we talked about it. Some left, but some are there, and we are quite optimistic. So if, I mean, you know, the businesses which we lost and some of the, you know, some of the challenges we faced in 2020, you know, we are calling our clients back and we're like, and we are, the deals are there, people are quite, projects which are stalled, we've resumed them, and that's why I'm quite optimistic that 2021 will be very positive.
Okay, George, I'll come to you on the same particular issue. Are you feeling as bullish, as optimistic? 2021, we switch gears, things get better?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on the show. I can say, as my friend has said, that 2020, the year 2020 was a very hard year for the country, because especially when the corona came in March, there were so many uncertainties, and we actually expected massive deaths, as we had seen in other countries. People were being buried in mass graves. The future seemed very bleak. There was no, it seemed that there was no hope. But we are happy because we are coming now out of the pandemic, and people have learned how now to take care of this thing which has come. Many people have gotten it, they have gotten well. It's not a death sentence. And we are happy because now people are starting to get back to normal, and people have seen it is not the end of the world. Because I remember, like for us, Mizizi Africa Homes Limited, when Corona came, there were some customers who had shown interest of buying, but when they saw Corona, they said, no, I can't touch this money because this is money for eating. I don't know what will happen in the next few months. And you remember people are shopping in bulk, people going to buy tissues and all those things. But now we are now at a stage whereby we have seen, yes, Corona is here. It's a disease which can be, you don't have to die, you can get it and you get well. We keep social distance, sanitize, we don't have to shake hands. So people have now started adopting to the new changes, and it's a good thing. And having learned actually many lessons in the Corona period, now we are seeing that we also need to support the government. Previously we just used to say the government, but the government also needs us, and as much as we need the government. So people have learned, church leaders, it's also time they take their position, corporate leaders, as well as the government at large, so that we can move the economy to the right where it deserves now, to come from the negativity and start growing.
Okay, as a business person, when you look at your books of accounts, are you feeling that change? Is it now positive from that particular point of view?
Sure. To be sincere, there has been a positive transformation. People now have started coming actually even in a bigger way, because for us, Mizizi Africa Homes Limited, we do affordable housing, and we use the concept called off-plan. And off-plan is a topic which people did not even want to listen to. But when we came as Mizizi Africa Homes Limited, we have been we have shown people, despite the corona, people need homes because there's a very big deficit for homes, like 2 million, and every year 200,000 according to statistics are needed.
Okay.
And the only solution is people come together and they do off-plan, because off-plan you join hands and you do it together. You don't have to leave it to a few people and just be a bystander. You come and we walk the journey, and at the end of the day we grow our economy and people get their desires.
Okay. Let's talk about the statistics right there. We have a man who crunches numbers all day. Like I told you, Reggie, I'm even afraid to come to you because when I ask your outlook for 2021, top line numbers, what are you looking at? What are you concerned about? Are you equally as optimistic that 2021 is going to be significantly better than what we saw in 2020?
Unfortunately, I'm not as optimistic as my colleagues. They're in business, so they have to be optimistic. Because if you're not optimistic, then you have no business being in business. But purely from an economist perspective, when you look at output or GDP growth, one thing that we need to understand in Kenya is 81% of our GDP is driven by private consumption. Yeah, that's what you and me, Jeff, spend money on, buying unga, bread, fueling, and all those other things. The government spending, this whole budget that people normally fight for, only contributes 16% of the GDP. Then another 15% or so comes from investments. Then our net exports to imports actually is a drag on GDP because it's at a negative 6.3%. So when I look at private consumption, which drives output annually in the country, I look at the factors, what drives that output, what drives private consumption. Then you look at elements of income, wealth, uncertainty, and indebtedness. So if you look at the element of income, people have lost jobs. People have gotten their income slashed in 2020. And none of that has actually been reversed. Secondly, when you look at income, majority of the people in the country are employed in the informal sector, where most of them actually earn either the minimum wage or below the minimum wage. The reversal of the taxation on PYE, again, has now reduced the disposable income for the people in the private sector for private consumption. People are not paying school fees last year. Now schools are back, they need to pay school fees. So again, disposable income has reduced. VAT has gone back to 16%. You know, people normally look at PYE in terms of how much you are taxed. But you know, after the government takes their PYE, if you remain with 40,000, if you spend that whole 40,000 in supermarkets, there's 16% the government is going to hit you. So in essence, you actually less 16% of the 40,000. So when you look at also the element of uncertainty, where does uncertainty come in? As much as the pandemic seems to be in some sort of control, the politics in the country is not really helping. We're going into an election year. Most people are not investing because I'm going into an election year. And this election becomes a bit more critical and the uncertainty is a bit more heightened because we have what we call an incumbency change. If Uhuru was running for presidency, you'll say, okay, maybe there's policy certainty going forward. But you're going to get a new president who's going to come in. My colleague has mentioned affordable housing. If the new president says to hell with affordable housing, that's the end of that project. And that's the problem that we have in this country, a lot of short-termism policies that are put in place. So we have a lot of policy uncertainty because there's a new government that is going to come in. They will come with their own agenda. It might not be a big four. They might come and decide, no, us, we only want to do a big one. The rest we cannot afford. The country is heavily indebted. So if you look at the budget policy statement that Treasury brought out just the other day, debt service is actually the largest component of the budget. It's more than what we are paying for health. It's more than what we are paying for education. It's more than what goes to, I think it's actually 1,000% more than what we give to the agricultural sector. So when you look at the 3 trillion budget for Treasury or for the government, and you look at where they are spending that money, so you also think, okay, the government is spending, but debt service is number one, followed by national security, followed by justice, government, and all those other things, then followed by education. And the budget for education of around 500 and something billion, 90% of it goes to recurrent, paying teacher salaries. It's not even to research and development. So our government spending is not actually creating policies or forwarding policies that help the private consumption, which is the largest pusher of output. So when you look at all these factors going forward, then I do not think we're actually going to have such a stellar year in 2021 or 2022. The effects of last year will be felt in the next 2 years, 3 years proper. And maybe finally is just, you will hear figures of 5% GDP growth or 6% GDP growth this year. But we need to take in mind that we're coming from a low base. So education, which was in negative 30, 40% last year, is going to have a good return this year, but it is not a growth. It is actually just recovering from the loss that we had. So if you want to compare growth for 2021, compare it with 2019 or 2018, then you know whether we've actually grown or not. But comparing it with 2020 is just creating an illusion that makes you create wrong policies or make wrong investments in 2021.
Like I told you, when you speak to Reggie, you have to brace yourself because rarely does he have good numbers coming from there. Bonke, you'd spoken about the fact that even as you look at the economy peaking, one issue and one critical factor is the politics of the day. As you can see right now, ironically, what should be bringing people together and making things harmonious has proved to be contentious, especially for the political class in the Building Bridges initiative. We are going into what could be a referendum in, mid-year, and then from there, the second half of the year, as we go into an election year. How do you see this, cyclical campaigning happening? Because they'll have to, go around with their road shows for the referendum, and as soon as they're done with that, now it's to seek the office for their political seats. How do you feel this playing in the business environment?
Well, thank you, Jeff. There is no way you can promote economy or our economy can grow when you are promoting illiteracy. Because what I've seen in the political arena, there's some bunch of politicians who are really, they're busy promoting illiteracy. I mean, I can't agree with a politician selling a wheelbarrow to my child. Because all these politicians, we know where their children are going to school. Some of them, they've even attained PhD. Some of them are running successful businesses. And when a politician picks a microphone, the only hope they can give the poor is mkokoteni and wheelbarrow. I mean, that's a fallacy. To me, if we want our economy to grow, we must embrace education and we must also promote entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. Now, the government should come in and support the local developers. For instance, if you look at the real estate, Kenyan government has really favored foreigners, especially Chinese who are developing in this country. Because if you move to all these estates, go to Kileleshwa, Lavington, go to Kilimani, go to Runda, go to Kayole, go to Kitengela, most of our lands, they are owned by Chinese, but how do they promote our economy? They come with their own engineers, they come with their own architects, they are the financiers, they can even translate in Chinese. So Kenyans are just there to be a gateman. And as far as the technical know-how, or when a developer wants to bring professionals on board, they don't promote professional consultants. And this is one thing the government has never been keen on. Chinese are coming to this country, buying our land, developing and selling us cheap houses, which are very substandard as far as the real estate standards are concerned. So coming to your question of how politics is now, the impact of politics as far as the economy is concerned, I was in Jubilee. I used to be in these shows every morning. Mm-hmm. In 2017, I really campaigned for Jubilee, but I'm very much disappointed with the current Jubilee I'm seeing. Because if I'm seeing what the DP is preaching and the president is preaching, it's like water and, like day and night. Mm-hmm. But I agree with the president. It is high time for us to come together as a country. I do disagree with the notion of the DP of bringing Tanga-Tanga, this Tanga-Tanga notion of the mkokoteni and wheelbarrow thing. No, that is not the way to go. Because I remember when we were with the deputy president at Kasarani, when now Jubilee was campaigning for the second term, I had the deputy president promising Kenyans 1 million jobs in a year. I had him mentioning some stadiums. And right now, he's not talking about them. When the Jubilee came into power for the second term, they were talking of cheap housing. Where are those houses? Okay. Kenyans are sleeping on the streets. If you go to these slums, people are living in a very pathetic, in a very pathetic state. We cannot analyze the state of economy by mentioning apartments going for 40 million. No, we need to discuss a Kenyan who is living in Mathare and paying a rent of 350 shillings. There are houses in this country, some tenants are paying 200 bob. So how can we embrace the lifestyle of such a Kenyan? These are the things we need to discuss. So then when the new president, we have the fifth president after President Uhuru Kenyatta, I heard the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga talking about the Prime Minister. We need the Prime Minister in this country. Well, if we may have the coalition government in 2022, then the first thing they need to revive is our economy. Because even before Corona came, we were not doing well as a country. And I can tell you Kenya is paying a very expensive loan. And even the other day, the World Bank had mentioned that Kenya is one of the corrupt countries in Africa. So these are some of the things that the state should come out heavily. And when the deputy president is promising us Mkukuteni in 2022, I heard him mentioning some 290 billion when he becomes the president. He will promote some youths in Mtwapa. That's a big lie. We cannot allow that. Mm-hmm. We need a leader. We need a president who can unite the country. Because I don't understand why there's some section of Jubilee leaders are fighting the relationship between Raila Amolo Odinga and the president. I mean, who was happy with this Mandamano every Mondays? Okay, well, let's take a short break at this particular point in time. I can see Bonki, the businessman, but also very passionate about the politics of the day. I'll come back, get to George, of course, speak about BBI in business, and then focus in on the real estate sector as well and where it stands even as we move forward. It was part of the pillar as far as the Big Four agenda is concerned. What's the status of that as well? That and more after the break. This is K24 This Morning. Don't go too far.